Sink
or
swim.
A Long COVID Long Haulers podcast. It's on every podcast platform where you listen to your podcasts. Follow, share, like, and leave comments. Well, here we are. Welcome to another Sink or Swim Long COVID Long Haulers podcast. This is episode number 2 with Angela. If you missed episode number 1, well, you'll want to go back and listen.
She got a third reinfection, of course, so hard to avoid. We actually don't even hardly ever leave our house to go anywhere. I go to the doctor and, I saw a family member and got it for a third time, unfortunately. For the first time in 2 years, I hadn't seen anybody, and that's all it took. So,
That was a short snippet from Angela talking about how she and her son both ended up catching COVID. She talks about a whole lot more, including dealing with friends, family, treatments. You do want to go back and listen to episode number 1. But here today, we're on episode number 2. I want to introduce to you Angela, an engineer, a mother, and just like us, a long COVID long haulers sufferer.
How did the vaccines fit into this? Did any of you use the vaccines, or did you not use the vaccines?
Yes. So we all got vaccinated. It did not protect us from getting COVID the third time. I have to say that my long COVID did kick up, after round 3, a few weeks later. I had mostly, it was such a mild case of COVID, if you call it mild, which people unfortunately use. I actually didn't really realize I was that sick. Even, with round 3, I just had like a headache one day, days separating with nothing. And then, I had like a rash. And then, my first symptom was I kind of had body aches for one day, but it was so mild that I didn't even realize I was sick. So there was no stopping me spreading it, to the rest of my family. But the long COVID, that comes after it was worse for me, with all 3 rounds. Weeks later, I got the COVID toes, and all the long COVID kicked up, the shaking and the burning in the blood vessels, feeling in the chest.
Do you feel after effects, like you said, COVID toe? And I got the same thing. Probably about 3, maybe even 4 months after the initial infection, I got the COVID toe. Even today, the rash, the lesion, that kind of stuff is not still there. It's been gone for a long time, but I can be sitting there and all of a sudden it just feels like somebody put an ice pick right in the same places where something like the COVID toe was located on my left foot. Does that happen to you?
The burning sensation only happens usually when my COVID toes kick up.
So yours comes back?
Yes, mine will go away and they will come back, and they have lasted, months on end too. So that was the thing, is like with round 1, I was like, oh, do I have the COVID toes today? I never even knew, they just...
Hey listeners, at the time of this episode recording, we only had 13 to 14 countries around the world. But at the time of the release and publication of this episode, we're already over 25 countries. So please join with us. Please support by following. Please like the episodes and please share. This is making a difference in people's lives and you can be a part of it. Please follow, like, and share. Join us today.
The cycling of stuff going and coming all the time.
Yeah, my wife is an RN, and she was doing some research on something totally unrelated. And I think she was looking at something, and she said, this looks almost like your toe looked. So I went around there, and it was like, that's exactly what it is, but it was on a kid's foot. It's amazing how I'm hearing you talk about that some of these symptoms kind of on a rotating basis almost just keep coming back, and that's what you're calling your roller coaster.
Yeah, and actually, the times when the COVID toes would get worse, I actually was typically feeling better. It was kind of interesting. So I didn't mind that symptom as much as the others, because I was like, I can live with the COVID toes.
Yeah.
I just don't want the other symptoms,
I'm going to kind of take us down a little bit of different pathway here. Quite frequently when I talk to people and when they've been on here for our conversations, we get to talking about things that are related to how when your roller coaster is really up or really down, there's the mental aspect of it. There's the trying to be normal. There's the trying to be with family.
Yeah.
My question is, what do you do to live? And when I say live, I don't just mean, what's your job?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. The long COVIDs, the long haulers, we have to make decisions to live. So what do you do to live?
On the really bad days, I actually bought this little pop-up sauna online, and it was like pretty amazing because I didn't have room for a full one, and I would hook that up, and it was like if I was struggling, with the joint pain or just feeling awful, I would just go sit in the sauna just to have my peaceful, quiet time. I've also bought this little headset that goes over your eyes and plays music and kind of massages your face for relaxation, because I think just calming your body down is very important. If there was other days, where I couldn't walk, I'd have a clawfoot tub. I'd go sit in the bathtub with Epsom salt, and I'd put a TV in there with Netflix and just sit there, and I didn't have to do anything. Just sat there and relax. Sometimes the right answer is not doing a whole lot and watching dumb shows on Netflix or whatever you have hooked up there. Days when I could walk, there was days where I couldn't even, I would go just sit on the front porch because it was hard for me to even walk anymore. I used to work out all the time. I remember one day it was like I couldn't even walk, past the grass. I was just to walk up the road. I was like, oh my gosh, this is awful. Doing what I could on the days I could without going over my limit, and everybody's limit, is what it is for them. So me trying to keep myself walking what I could and kind of increasing it as I could was very helpful for me. And I put in a little pathway in my yard here because I have this huge garden. So I would go walk, on the little pathway through the trees. I guess they call it nature healing. I think in Japan, and just even going out in my garden, even if I wasn't doing much, I just think being outside, fresh air, sunlight, just not sitting in the house. Sometimes just that change of scenery to feel like you're kind of living as much as you can. I fortunately have gotten to a point where, I can go out and garden and I can go for walks and things like that. And I know other people aren't so fortunate. But I think, me getting to a place where I was recovered before this last round has helped me actually not be as bad as far as the long haul. With this third round, it's not as bad as round one, at least, thank goodness.
Yeah. So I still find it very, very interesting that yours functions so much like a roller coaster. I guess I wonder in my head which is mentally harder to deal with. Mine, because I have it every day. Yes, it goes up and down in quality, but it doesn't go away. It's really kind of not a question. It's more of a discussion, because I'm betting after this podcast we'll hear about a few more people that are dealing with the roller coaster kind of effect. The mental aspect, it's one of the biggest battles I deal with because I don't know when it's going to end. Yours almost is you don't know when it's going to come back. You kind of think it's going to, but you don't know if it will or will not.
Right.
So yours is almost like playing Russian roulette, when mine is almost like being a prisoner of war. It's amazing how the two contrast with each other. How do you deal with your mental part?
My mental part was trying to control what I could control, so it didn't control me. That was kind of going back to the, I'm very strict with my food even still, making sure I was not, eating the processed foods, doing everything in my power to try and control it. So I've never been a good sleeper either. So sleeping as much as I could, trying to fix as much as I could. Also, seeking out treatments, trying to go to doctors.
I get the sleeping part. I never used to be a real good sleeper either, but I'll tell you what, these nights where you just can't go to sleep and it's 5 o'clock a.m., 6 o'clock a.m. When I was in college, I called 6 a.m. the stupid hour. It was stupid to be up that late, and it was stupid safe to get up that early, in my opinion, in college. But now it's like, man, how can I be not, I mean, I'm tired. I know I'm tired.
Yeah.
But you just can't go to sleep. And it's just weird.
Yeah, it is. I've suffered. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You know, when you guys were talking about the mental health aspect, you mentioned about going outside, sitting outside, walking in your garden, that nature has healing properties. And you're absolutely right. Nature does have healing properties. When nature is able to work in our body, because our bodies were made to have innate immune systems. When our immune systems are put in the best possible condition, we're able to tolerate illnesses, stresses that our body is placed under. Mm-hmm. That's one of the answers that I heard you say to the mental health part of it is nature. I mean, our bodies long to go back home, and home meaning earth, meaning nature. When we are exposed to green areas, our bodies respond differently than when we are in four walls, in the house, in a hospital room, whatever that might be. And exactly. I know as a nurse that if we can't take our patients to nature, we need to bring nature to our patients. And that might be plants, that might be putting them in a room that has a window with a view.
Yeah.
And just that little, or the sound of water, even if you have water running on a radio or an iPod or something like that, you are taking care of your mental health with your nature components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll go out there and I'll just stare at the birds or whatnot. And, I noticed that I would feel better just even going and sitting out there. It's amazing how it just kind of helps when you stop thinking about how sucky you're feeling. You kind of just get your mind off of it for a few minutes and just kind of enjoy, what's around you. But it's hard because I know you're in pain, and it's really, really hard, especially, when you're shaking with tremors or whatever. It's easier said than done sometimes.
I tell a story. I teach nursing right now, and I tell a story to my students about the value of nature, and a story about a gentleman that was waiting for a heart transplant. And he was in the hospital for months now waiting for this heart transplant. And he wasn't going to get to go home or even go anywhere until he got the heart transplant. His favorite place in the world was by the beach. And he had been stuck in this hospital room for months on end. And he was beginning to be depressed. His condition was deteriorating. And it was some nurses that decided that they were going to go get a shower curtain that looked like the beach. And they got a shower curtain and they hung it in his room and they put a recliner next to it. So his view was of the beach. And he made leaps and bounds in progress until the time he was able to get his heart transplant. And it was because of a shower curtain.
That's amazing.
I frequently say it's a choice, but the choice sometimes is so difficult that it's hard to make, and then it's hard to make and follow through with. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is when we get in that gutter, or when we get into something that we have a really tough time doing it on our own, so we have to have some kind of support. We have to have a person, a friend, a family, somebody, something that is a support. So who or what would you consider your support? Tell our listeners about how that works and how it helps you.
Yeah, I think my biggest support has actually been some of the online groups for long COVID, because, it made me feel like I wasn't so crazy. Some of these symptoms, you're just like, what is going on today? Especially with my cyclical nature, is just like, what is happening now? Seeing that other people are having the same symptoms. So it's not in your head. You go to some doctors and they might say, oh, you don't have a positive test or whatever. And it's, come on, like there is something wrong. Some of these specialists you'll go to, that's like they look at one thing. Is you have to look at the whole picture. Talking to other people, at least that understand, makes a huge difference. There's also, I've talked to a few people that have contacted me, asking like, how can I help educate my family about long COVID. There's a really good movie online. The longhaul.movie is the website. And so tried to, make sure that friends and family watch that as well, so that they kind of have a little bit better of an understanding, because I think it's hard for people that aren't going through it to actually understand.
Name it again.
Longhaul.movie is the name of the movie. So one thing I've done is, I share it with people because I want to help people get educated on it so that they can try to help support you. It's hard though, so you have to think of it as people aren't going to understand unless they're going through it, but they're going to try their best to support you if they can, if they understand a little bit about it. So trying to educate them about it so that maybe they're like, oh, I understand why you can't walk today and you could yesterday, or I understand why you can't make your meals anymore, so that they can offer the support you need. So I think the education part is, and I think we can support ourselves by admitting to ourselves that if we aren't okay, we need to set our expectations realistically for that day. If you're having a good day, you can say, maybe I'll treat myself to this or that, but it's okay to say you're not okay.
I agree with you on that. And one thing that I would say for the men that may be listening to this, or whoever the supporter is, to get whoever those guys are that are suffering from the long haul, long COVID, it is not a failure to say what Angela just said. It is not weak. It is actually an intelligent decision to be able to sit down and say, here's where my limits are. If I'm going to do whatever I want to do tomorrow, I have to realize what my limits are today. And
exactly.
I know that's really one I struggle with, because I'll just beat the tar out of something to get something done, just like I used to do. And boy, tomorrow... And I just jumped on one of the groups because I wanted to say the name correctly. It's called COVID Long Haulers Humor Therapy Group. If you're not in there, you need to go check it out, because the very first one, as I scroll down, it is Kermit sitting on the curb, his head down, and he's just exhausted. And he says, I feel like I'm already tired tomorrow. And that's true. And it's just, there's always stuff on there that kind of makes you laugh, and it's humor. I really enjoy humor to help make it through stuff. But
I would kind of like to hear if this experience has affected your job.
It has been difficult because I'm not the same person I was before. What I've had to do is write myself Post-its of my little goals to do throughout the day, to kind of feel like, yes, I'm progressing, I'm doing what I can, taking days off, when I've needed to, just because you kind of have to. Sometimes you have to admit, like, some days you're not okay. After I'd done the cytokine treatment and recovered some, I actually was happy to feel like myself again, because that brain fog is just so debilitating. It's really hard to focus. It's really hard to do like things that I used to be able to do if I was having an off day. I noticed like my math skills were horrible and I'm an engineer and I'm like, oh my gosh, it does. It is a struggle. I've luckily have had people that are pretty supportive, at work and stuff. So I haven't been shy about it, because I think we have to share that we're not okay, and it's okay to do that, because you have to set your expectations appropriately. I've had some days where it's like, okay, I can get more done in the morning, and I look at where I'm most effective, because I know some days my symptoms would kick up the most at night. So if it was that I worked it in the morning, took a little walk around the garden, a 15-minute walk or whatever I needed to do to get through the day.
I have that bouncing back and forth for the mornings and the nights. Usually when it starts to get dark, I can tell, and it doesn't go off the clock. I think you could put me in a room with no light, no windows, and I'd still have a general idea about when the earth seems to be where it's at, and whatever it is that my body uses as its internal time clock on how it makes me feel. It's again, I have to say, it's the weirdest thing, and I've never been able to run into anybody yet that can explain all of it to a point of understanding all of it yet. But we keep going and we'll get there. So is there anything else that you would like to bring up? Anything else that you would like to say or talk about before we close out?
Be your own advocate and try to find the resources you need. If you're not okay, find a support group. If a doctor doesn't believe you, find another one.
Yeah, that's one spot where I've been very lucky. It's partially probably because I'm a PA and my wife is an RN, so they tended to believe us a little bit more without, raising the layman issue. Just because your doctor doesn't believe you doesn't mean it's not real. It means you need to go find another doctor because you need to be, like you said, an advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you've given those people that are listening, and Staci.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening to this episode and others. We have a website where we put all of the information and links that our interviewees provide us. You can go see information about the movie she talked about. You can also go see information about the nowleap.com. So go to our website at sinkorswimpod.com. That's sinkorswimpod.com. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for doing all this too, because I've had so many people reach out to me, and they're asking me because I was one of the people that have recovered, at one point before this last round. I'm doing treatment again through that chronic treatment center, so I think I'll be okay in a few weeks. But
I would be very interested to see whatever info you could send me on that, because I know it's local. Yeah. It's local to you, right?
No, it's actually across the United States. So I participated in their original research. They published several papers. My son and I both participated in the original research, and they basically had found the pattern of cytokines that were elevated in long haulers.
Yes.
From the research. And they actually found persistent virus in the monocyte.
Yes.
Not fully it can't replicate because it doesn't have the full RNA. It's just particles. Huh. But they found it still in the blood, 15 months later in people. And it's because our bodies aren't getting rid of the monocytes with the virus that our immune systems took out, and that's why the symptoms kick up. So that's why, going through that treatment, they told me, hey, don't go do cardio, because you go do cardio, you're going to kick up the monocytes, which kicks up your symptoms, which is part of the whole cyclical nature of what I was doing.
So it's kind of like you don't run through a dusty room, or your allergies are going to take off. So, I know that's simplistic, but just for understanding, that's about the best way to apples. Yeah,
there's some people it hasn't worked for, but I think they said there's about an 85% rate of it working for people.
Now that's not the EBOO, is it?
It's not the what?
EBOO, EBOO. It's another treatment. Okay.
No, this is just cytokine panels and them targeting the cytokine. So one of the patterns with the long haulers is high CCL5 or RANTES is what they call it. High RANTES is typical in the long haulers. And when you have a high RANTES, the cytokine chemokine panel, it basically is keeping the messaging from going through from your other cytokines that are saying, hey, do this, do that, take out these monocytes with this virus in it. So the goal of their treatment is to lower those cytokines into a normal range. One of the patterns I think they found was we have low CCL4, higher other cytokines. And so what they try to do is get that CCL4 cytokine to actually raise, and that lowers the other cytokines. They kind of all follow the RANTES.
For an engineer, you sure done your research.
Oh,
my goodness.
Yeah,
I'm very impressed. I really am. I'm very impressed.
Yeah. So, I went through the treatment, so
yeah.
I know that what my panel looked like in my son's. So, we did that. Actually, this last time, I just actually have the vascular inflammation. I don't have all of the cytokines high like I did before, which was interesting.
Well, again, I will say thank you. Everything that you've shared, everything you've been very gracious in what you're sharing with everybody that will listen. We actually have about 13, maybe 14 different countries that people listen to the podcast from already. And the podcast is not old. I mean, it's brand new. I know what it's going to do, and I know that every podcast we put out is going to get listened to for a long time, over and over, as people discover it and as people start looking around. So the number of people that you ultimately, over the next year or two, however long, the number of people that you're going to end up touching because of your podcast here, I think it's going to be pretty incredible. So I tell you thank you for that, because you probably just touched a whole lot of people and maybe made a difference in a whole lot of people's lives. So thank you very much. And Angela, if there isn't anything else, I appreciate your time. I wish you the best of luck. I hope you don't get another roller coaster ride. I hope and pray you're done with it, because none of us deserve it.
We pray for your baby too.
Yeah, him too.
I don't care how old your son is. He's still your baby. So we pray for him as well.
I know. Luckily, the long COVID is not as bad in him this last round either. Like, we all were scared, but the weird thing is my husband, who hasn't been a long hauler, it hit him with round 3. So I think people need to realize if they think they're scared because they were okay with round 1 or round 2, they might not be okay with round 3 or 4.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything with COVID that can be a taken or a given. I think it's just something that we're going to learn as we go. So, all right, Angela, I appreciate it. We're going to go. I really, really, really appreciate your time, and thank you for doing this with us.
I want to thank you, the listeners, for joining us for another episode of Sink or Swim, a Long COVID Long Haulers podcast. Our podcasts are now on every podcast platform that is out there that we're aware of. If you can't find it on the one that you listen to, please email us at info@sinkorswimpod.com. Our website is sinkorswimpod.com. You can find the information that we have discussed here and more information, including where there are clinics that can provide treatments for you. If you are a long COVID long hauler, my empathy, my prayers, and my thoughts are with you. I am one with you. If you are a supporter of a long COVID long hauler, I want to thank you for doing what you're doing. I want to encourage you to keep going, because there may or may not be an end to what they're going through. I also want to encourage all of you, follow the podcast. Please click the button, follow the podcast. Please like the episodes, and please share. There are over 11 million long COVID long haulers just in the United States, and we are now over 25 to 27 countries around the world. Please follow, like the episodes, and share the podcast. Your support is greatly appreciated. We are making a difference.